Beach Boys, episode 4 of season 2. We got a good one today. How are you doing, Connor?
I am wonderful. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Had that event last night with Larry Sharp,
Yeah, how was that?
Libertarian candidate for the governor of New York. It was pretty good, actually. He had an interesting take on taxes and everything, because it's a heated debate when it comes to politics. So it was pretty interesting to hear his take on everything. The main thing he prefaced was he doesn't want to stifle small businesses, and he doesn't want to stifle especially cryptocurrency too, because there's very innovative tech that we have right here. We have a chance to evolve into something great.
Yeah.
And he thinks, we specifically talked about the bit license last night, and he was talking about how that completely just eliminated every kind of cryptocurrency company outside of New York. All of them moved out, and imagine where we could be if they would have stayed in New York,
Yeah.
So it was
Thanks to
interesting.
was it Losky? That guy Losky?
Yeah. Yeah. They actually talked about him a little bit last night.
Really?
Not great things. I'll say that. It wasn't great
Yeah.
things. But it was a pretty cool event, though. A lot of libertarians out there. It was kind of, some people were libertarian, not really into crypto, learning a little bit about crypto. It was kind of nice to be there representing Bitcoin.com, and
Yeah.
gave out a ton of T-shirts and a bunch of stickers.
Sweet.
So yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll try and get them on the show or something.
That'd be good.
Listen to their take.
Well, tonight we got a special guest. We have the CEO of yours.org, Ryan Charles, and we'll be talking to him a little bit about a wide range of things, but I think the main thing we wanted to talk to him about was the upcoming money button. So that's really exciting. Yeah, looking forward to that in a minute here. And I wanted to call out the Kryptonize.it people hooked us up with some free T-shirts, so this is Spend and Replace. We've been talking about their Cash Pay wallet, right? So directly in their Cash Pay wallet, you can buy anything with Bitcoin, and automatically it'll replenish from fiat into your Cash Pay wallet. So this was really cool. Then I gotta get you your shirt. They sent me your shirt too. I was wanting to save them on postage, but and then they also gave us some other really cool T-shirts, which we'll show in a little bit here. But yeah, so thank you guys very much, and I encourage everyone to get their wallet and start using Kryptonize.it and their Cash Pay wallet for sure. So
Awesome.
So I guess we'll lead into the show here.
Right? Yeah, we'll get in the show right about now.
Everyone enjoy. All right, we are live. Welcome, Ryan, to our show. Thanks for hopping on with us. We got quite a big few questions, but we can kind of go off script, anything like that. But really, okay. I know what I'm most excited to hear about from you is the money button, because we added that to our website in a minute. It was trivial to add to the website, and that was just the prototype. So I'm sure whatever the final product coming soon is going to be a killer app on Bitcoin Cash, I'm sure. But maybe before we get into that, if we could just talk about maybe a little bit of your background. I've seen some interviews with you. I've obviously followed you for a little bit here. So I know actually we're pretty similar. You were pursuing a PhD in physics, is that right? And then decided there's absolutely no career paths in physics at all, right? Most people find that out pretty quickly unless you're just going to go straight into research in the university world. So I guess what generally got you interested in Bitcoin, and how'd you get here?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I was I was getting a PhD in physics at WashU in St. Louis. I was studying high energy astrophysics. I've also been. Some people assume that I was just that I've just been a physicist my whole life or something. But actually, I was involved in computers since a young age. I've been programming since I was little. So it's very natural for me to pursue just technical things. And I just discovered Bitcoin actually, let me back up a second and just say that I lived through the 2008 financial crisis, and I watched a lot of people, including my parents, lose money. in the 2008 financial crisis. And when I just watched the news at that time, it's like, gosh, the financial system seems kind of corrupt and broken. I wonder if there's a better way. And I remember thinking at the time that, well, I thought maybe some type of gaming currency like World of Warcraft Gold would take off with a big audience, and maybe that's the future of money.
Right.
So that's about the extent of my thinking on the future of the economy, but I was sort of open to something new. And I just read an article about Bitcoin in early 2011, and I thought, well, that sounds absolutely amazing. Decentralized money. I didn't know that was possible. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the type of thing that could actually be the foundation of the future world financial system. So I just got really interested in it. So I discovered it on May 13, 2011, and I was so fascinated that I set aside the next day, May 14, 2011, which was a Saturday, to just studying Bitcoin all day. And it was so interesting, and I thought that, well, I couldn't not continue to research it. So I ended up spending about 3 weeks basically just full-time obsessed with Bitcoin when I was supposed to be researching physics, just obsessively, reading everything about it. I started reading books on economics, and I just was absolutely captivated that it seemed to be for real, that this actually was decentralized money. This is incredible. This could change the world. And I guess after about 3 weeks, it was obvious that I needed to resume my physics studies or I was going to have a problem. So my obsession kind of waned, and it became sort of a hobby, I guess, for a couple of years. And then fast forward to 2013, Bitcoin got big enough by 2013, and it was growing really quickly that it basically became possible to have a career in Bitcoin, because there are actually venture capital funded companies that were actually hiring people. It wasn't just a hobby. They were people who were actually spending their full-time effort on it. And I thought, well, gosh, if I don't get into this now, I'm sure I'm going to regret this later. This is my chance to be on the ground floor of a new emerging industry. So I decided to leave my PhD and go full-time Bitcoin. And so it was both the fact that there was a new opportunity in Bitcoin, or at least it seemed like an opportunity, which I think was correct. I mean, it's grown a lot since then. But also that, physics seemed like kind of a bad career choice at that point, because I actually wanted to be a professor, but the thing is, like, it's a really, really tough life. And I remember reading a lot of, the life stories of some of my famous, my favorite scientists, people that I thought were excellent scientists, and realizing that they actually had kind of a hard life, that actually if you try to pursue this academic life, that there really just aren't enough jobs for how many people have PhDs, actually. And so it's a very, very competitive, low-paying, career path where actually it's pretty unlikely that you're actually going to discover something, groundbreaking, just because it just kind of moves kind of slow. I mean, It's actually really hard to discover something genuinely new. So anyway, for all those reasons, I decided to leave my PhD and get into Bitcoin. And there's a lot of stuff that happened after that, but that's kind of how I got involved in a full-time capacity in 2013.
And we don't have to go too into this. I know it sounds like there's a whole lot of story behind it, but I'm really interested that you worked at Reddit for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
When Yishan was the CEO?
That's correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because it's just really fascinating to me. They hired you to work on some kind of cryptocurrency implementation on top of Reddit, to essentially do something maybe a little similar to what yours.org does today.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm just kind of really curious, like, what happened, and
sure,
because it's clearly a missed opportunity on their part, in my opinion.
Sure.
But
sure. Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, of course, I think it's a missed opportunity as well, because this was way back in 2014. I mean, now it's 2018. We're 4 years later. We still have yet to see like a mainstream social media app adopt cryptocurrency in a serious way. Although you can see a lot of signs that maybe they will. So we have things like, I think it's Pornhub, that like they have some cryptocurrency integration of some sort. That's not really a normal social media company, but they are a large company that's kind of in the same world of ideas. And you can see if they can do it, maybe something like Reddit could do it again. But actually, we were kind of starting to do it 4 years ago. So what happened? Well, what happened was I was working at BitPay at the time in San Francisco, and for people who don't know, BitPay is I think to this day the largest Bitcoin payment processor, and I believe they're the oldest Bitcoin company that's actually still around, and they're growing and all that stuff as well. And I was just working at BitPay as an engineer, and I got contacted by a recruiter for Reddit, and I thought, well, that's interesting. why would a recruiter from Reddit contact me about being a cryptocurrency engineer? That sounds really cool. What is Reddit going to do with cryptocurrency? So I interviewed there, and I thought, okay, well, so I met the CEO of Reddit. I'm like, well, what am I going to say to the CEO of Reddit? Even if I ultimately don't join the company, this is a cool opportunity to say whatever I want to say to the CEO of Reddit. So I decided I was going to tell the CEO of Reddit that what you need to do is you need to decentralize Reddit. And to me, that meant both decentralizing it in the sense of, having distributed sort of content storage and whatnot, but also integrating cryptocurrency to solve a lot of the problems around incentivizing people correctly inside the app. So I just kind of pitched this idea of decentralizing Reddit, and he was totally sold because, of course, they kind of are already thinking about things like this, or they wouldn't be hiring a cryptocurrency engineer. So I managed to impress them, and they ultimately ended up giving me a job offer to join as cryptocurrency engineer. Now, the thing is, when I joined, it actually wasn't really clear what I was actually going to do. So we didn't have like specific plans. And it was interesting that when I joined on my second day, they announced that they raised $50 million in a new round led by Sam Altman. And that as a part of this new round, the investors had agreed to give 10% of the equity that they were buying back to the users in the form of a cryptocurrency.
Wow.
So this was the actual project that they didn't actually tell me this in advance, but I get that I'm like, oh, okay, so you already have some idea about what you kind of want to do. So let me just work on that. That sounds like the perfect thing. So I ended up spending my time working with actually another guy whose name is Daniel, who for some reason was sort of less well known than me at the time, because at the time it was kind of like, it was like really like newsworthy in the cryptocurrency world that somebody joined Reddit to work on this stuff. And the other guy is less well known, probably because he didn't post as much to social media as I did. But there were actually two of us. His name was Daniel, and we were kind of working on this, just trying to figure out how the hell we're going to distribute like Reddit equity in the form of a cryptocurrency to the users. And there were sort of two problems. There's the technical problem, and there's the legal problem. The technical problem is just obviously how do you do it technically, and there's kind of a big story there because. Well, I'll kind of leave this hanging, but we talked with Blockstream a lot, actually, way back in 2014. And they were going to help us solve the technical problem, but there's also a totally different problem, which is the legal problem, which is how do you legally distribute equity to hundreds of millions of people? And that actually turns out to be the bigger problem, because basically you can't do it legally. Or at least, I mean, you can, but you have to have all the users comply with AML KYC stuff, meaning they have to give up they have to scan their passport or something like that, which is a really unusual thing for Reddit users to do.
Right.
Reddit users are totally pseudonymous. You have no idea what their real world identity is. It's very much contrary to the sort of philosophy of Reddit that they'd have to scan their passport photo to receive some cryptocurrency. So anyway, that was what we were going to do. But then sadly, what happened was after I was there for about a month and a half, if I remember correctly, Yishan, the CEO who I reported to, resigned suddenly. He stopped showing up, and we're like, what's going on? Where's Yishan? And then we hear from Ellen Pao, who ended up taking over as interim CEO, that Yishan had resigned. And so what I mean, it's obvious in hindsight, although I didn't realize it at the time, but that basically killed the cryptocurrency project, because there was no way the new leadership was going to deal with that. And I don't even remember everything that was going on, but there was a bunch of other drama going on at the time. Like, for instance, they decided to move the whole company to San Francisco because they had actually been a remote company. Oh. And they wanted to move everybody there. So this created a lot of other turmoil at the company that was kind of going on at the same time. And so for the CEO to suddenly resign, have new leadership, and be dealing with all these other problems, there was just no way they were going to do something like cryptocurrency.
Sure.
It was too difficult, too expensive, too unclear. Like it seemed like a giant expensive project that would never end, just basically for these legal reasons. So unfortunately, basically what ended up happening was I was laid off. So I kind of kept working there for another 3 or so months, and they eventually pulled me aside and they're like, so we're just not going to do this cryptocurrency stuff right now. It's better if you leave. So I had to leave and just go do other stuff. And eventually what I would end up working on is yours. And so, yeah, it is actually kind of like what we could have done at Reddit. It's definitely influenced by my experience at Reddit. And I think to some extent we executed on those ideas by building an actual working product that is a social media website like Reddit, but with integrated cryptocurrency micropayments.
And what I would say is that what seems like the failures of Reddit since then, at least in my own opinion, just having been on Reddit for years now, the content itself has gotten, as a perfect example, if you go look at like cryptocurrency subreddits or Bitcoin as one perfect example, the content itself is not really driven by any kind of market decisions, market forces, I guess. It's really just, okay, who can have the most users, things like that. By far, and like I want to make this very clear, yours.org is by far the greatest thing to come out, I think, in the past. I mean, really, the content itself, the easy ability to earn money, even if you just upvote something, you get, maybe if something's really popular, you get $1 sometimes, things like that. The actual content itself is obviously driven by it's sort of an economy of content, right? So I do want to say, like, you guys have done an amazing job with yours.org, because it's seriously, I mean, a great user experience. It's awesome. So I want to make that very clear.
Thank you very much.
So
I really appreciate that.
So I guess what's interesting is that I'm kind of in a way glad, I guess, that maybe Reddit didn't do that, because I think you guys have done a really great job in implementing something very straightforward, which maybe brings us to, and we'll, you guys worked on payment channels at yours.org, right? And you had essentially implemented something similar to what the Lightning Network is trying to accomplish. And how was that experience? I know it was very, from what I've heard you and talk about, is it's kind of been gruesome. It was kind of hard to put together, and that was obviously just something that you had to do because the block size was full or getting full. How was that experience for you?
I mean, let me just kind of tell that part of the story. So let me think about this. So the project actually started in late 2015 as an open source project called DAT, D-A-T-T. That would turn into what is now yours.org. And it ended up being that we sort of founded the company, as myself and my former co-founder, Clemens Lay, started the company in early 2016. So it's a little more than 2 years ago now that we kind of got official about it, started a real business and everything around it. And what we quickly realized was, okay, so we want to make a social media with micropayments. Fees on Bitcoin at that point had gotten kind of high at about 5 cents per transaction. Now, in hindsight, it's almost funny thinking that we would think 5 cents is high, because it's actually pretty rare that you find a cryptocurrency with fees under 5 cents right now. I mean, many of them are actually more expensive than that, like Ethereum and Monero and things like that are all actually more than that. But at the time, that was extremely high, 5 cents per transaction, because you know that you can't actually do real micropayments if that's what fees are right now. Because if you try to send somebody 5 cents or less, the fees are completely ridiculous. I mean, the fees would be like 100% or more. So you couldn't do really small payments, and we thought that really small payments was actually pretty important for the social media app that we're trying to make, because we wanted it to be possible to send like 1 cent if we could do it. And also fees were rising, so it's not just they were already 5 cents; it's that it was clear that they were going to get higher. So we're like, okay. At the time, Lightning Network was an idea, and we read the Lightning Network white paper, and we read some other research from people like Christian Decker and a few other papers that we could find on payment channels and routing payments through a network of payment channels. And so we ended up designing and developing our own routed payment channel technology, similar to the Lightning Network, but it didn't actually exist at the time. I mean, the only option we had was to try to do it ourselves, because there was no code or anything that we could use. We had to just do it on our own. And we did sort of two things differently than Lightning Network. One was we simply had a different protocol. So we had to design our own protocol, because there was no Lightning spec or something for us to follow. So we just had to kind of do it ourselves. But then also we made it work inside of a web browser, which we thought was really important, because we don't want users to have to download an app. We want you to just have to visit a website to do this. Now, I'm pretty sure early on we thought, we'll get this done in like 3 months. This will be something we'll just bang out, routed payment channels, it'll be nothing. We've got all this other software. Well, it ended up taking more than a year to get like a prototype of it working. And ultimately we would spend a year and a half working on it, where almost all of our time for that year and a half was just basically making it work inside of a web browser. Now, what we learned after about a year and a half was there are all sorts of really tough challenges if you want to actually make this technology work for end users. So if you want it to actually work the way you'd expect it to work from an end user's point of view, you basically want to be able to deposit money instantly, if possible. You want to send money around instantly, and you want the fees to be really low, and then you want to be able to cash out instantly. And it turns out that it really just doesn't work that way at all. Like there's all sorts of problems that it just doesn't work the way you would think it would. For instance, I mean, you can't cash in instantly because you got to open a channel. So like you got to wait a while for your channel to open. Also, if the fees are high, it actually costs a good deal of money to open a payment channel. So it kind of depends on what fees are, but it takes several transactions to open a channel. Also, the channels have to be funded. So you can't just open like a 1 cent channel. You got to pay the fees, and let's suppose the fees are like $1 per transaction. It takes about 3 transactions to open a channel. That's like $3. Plus, you got to fund the channel with more money than the fees, or you don't have any money left over to send through the channel. So that means that the fees are like $3 total. Well, then you got to really open it with like probably like at least $30 per channel, because otherwise the fees are kind of high. I mean, even if you put $30 in there and you send the money one way, that's still a 10% fee, which is actually kind of high. So you might want to put even more money in that. And then also the thing is, like, our company would have to then open channels to the users, because in order to receive money, we have to open a channel from what we called, we actually called it an oracle, but the more correct term is really a hub. We had a payment channel hub. We have to open channels back out from our hub to the users to receive payments. And so then we have to like front the money. So we have to open our own channels. So there's the channels that the users open to us, and then we have to open channels back to the users. And, you know, where does this money come from? You got to pay the fees. You got to pay $3 per channel just that goes to Bitcoin miners, basically. You got to leave capital just sitting there on the channels. The users have to do that, and the company has to do that to be able to use this. So it ended up adding up to be like, well, actually, you can't even really do it, because actually it's so expensive, even with fees that are $1, that where's that money supposed to come from? Like, we have to earn quite a lot of money per user to be able to continue to fund new channels to new users. Plus, there are other weird problems, like you got to be online to receive a payment. Well, that actually just doesn't really work at all in a web browser. I mean, it's just like you just don't actually have the website open most of the time, so you're not online. Even if you try to go out of your way to keep the website open, but in a background tab, it turns out that modern web browsers downregulate the processing of a background tab so that it basically doesn't do anything. Like, you can't do anything like process a Lightning payment if the tab is in the background, because you use up all of this sort of throttled computational power that the browser does in like an instant, and you can't actually do anything. So everything sort of times out. So you literally have to be looking at the app to be able to receive a payment. So this is extremely unrealistic almost all of the time. So anyway, and those are just the problems I can remember. I wrote an article where I sketched them all out. There are a bunch of others actually. So anyway, what we learned after all this time was like, this just isn't going to work. We just put 1.5 years of our lives into this, and we just can't make this work for end users. And if you look at what the Lightning Network people are doing right now, I mean, they're facing exactly these issues. And if you look at people that actually try and use it, I mean, it is nowhere near being usable to a mainstream audience. And some of these problems will literally never be solved. I mean, you just can't ever work around the fact that you got to be online to receive a payment without ultimately offloading that onto a trusted third party base. And
right.
If you're doing that, then there's no point in doing the payment channel stuff to begin with. So anyway, so that's what we learned. And actually, I now think of the history of this company as what we really needed to do was we needed to survive long enough for Bitcoin Cash to launch, because now that we have Bitcoin Cash, we can actually do the stuff that we were trying to do from the very beginning. So yeah, so we were extremely excited about Bitcoin Cash when it launched, and we were the first company to like outright switch from something else. And that, at the time, we were actually using Litecoin, because we had figured out that Bitcoin was just too expensive. Litecoin was the same thing, but cheaper. And so the fees were lower, and so some of these problems were a little bit better on Litecoin. Like basically the cost of opening and funding these payment channels was a lot better on Litecoin. So we're actually using Litecoin, but we switched to Bitcoin Cash because we could get rid of the payment channels altogether. We archived 10,000 lines of code and got rid of all these bugs and usability problems instantly by just switching to Bitcoin Cash. So that's why we were the first company to do that. We launched our prototype of yours.org on Bitcoin Cash August 25th, which is 25 days into the existence of Bitcoin Cash, because that's just how long it took for us to study it, to be convinced that it was actually going to survive, and to realize that it worked the way we were hoping, which was that you go back to what I said at the beginning. What you ultimately want for an end user experience is You basically want to be able to cash in instantly and almost for free, and you want to be able to send money around instantly and for free, and you want to be able to cash out instantly and for free. And you actually can do that with Bitcoin Cash, and you just can't do that with payment chains.
Yeah, that's that's a crazy timeline of events there. What I find most interesting too is that you are clearly one of the first. You have firsthand experience. Okay, how does a payment channel work? If I'm developing this, and then also like I'm trying to build it for a customer experience, and it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like what you're talking about is really going to change with the Lightning Network. It almost seems like all of the problems still exist there. And I guess we don't have to get too into the Lightning Network, but in general, I guess having done what you had done with the payment channels, are you optimistic or pessimistic about solving the routing problem on Lightning Network?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm certainly optimistic that they're going to keep trying for a long time, but I am not optimistic that they're ever actually going to solve it. So yeah, the routing problem is just one of countless problems that they have. And no, I don't think they can solve it. They keep saying it's just like internet routing. It's definitely not. It's not, because you don't have this weird capital problem that you have with the Lightning Network. Like you got to it's not just finding a route. It's finding a route that's sufficiently well funded. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, like they don't even have a theoretical answer to that, much less a working software solution to it. So yeah, I think they're going to keep working on it because I think they're very motivated. I think they passionately believe their philosophy about what they're trying to do, but I don't think they're ever actually going to solve it. I believe some of these problems are fundamentally unsolvable while keeping the maximum block size throttled. And so I don't think they can ever solve some of these things, including routing.
All right, I'll keep waiting 18 months. We'll see. So I wanted to talk about, you mentioned your co-founder Clemens, something I found extremely interesting. I know that he's no longer with yours.org, but the Satoshi's Vision Conference, he gave an awesome presentation about Bitcoin being Turing complete. And it sounds like maybe both of you were a little bit involved in that search or whatever you would want to call that. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe the history of that, and also I guess what you learned from there?
Sure. So let me just, once again, I'll just kind of tell the story. It's actually kind of interesting, everything that happened. So Clemens has a PhD in automata theory, which still happens if you had to pick one thing to have a PhD in to ultimately figure out that Bitcoin is Turing complete. That's exactly what you would want to study. So we started working together in early 2016, and I knew more about Bitcoin than Clemens did at the time. And so I remember thinking, well, let's just make sure we're kind of on the same page about Bitcoin. And so let me just run through how everything works, including script. Script is the built-in smart contract language. In Bitcoin, it's very common for people to say Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts. That's completely ridiculous. Bitcoin invented decentralized smart contracts. It has script built in. It has since the beginning. It's just not Turing complete, and nor is it stateful the way that Ethereum is. But anyway, I'll come back to the Turing completeness thing in a second. So anyway, it has a scripting language, and the scripts are inside the inputs and outputs. And in order to validate a transaction, you have to validate all the inputs, and you do this by actually running the scripts. And so it turns out that the script is very Forth-like. It's like the programming language Forth, and it does not have any loops, and it has two stacks. And it's kind of interesting when you look at it, because it to anybody who's studied automata theory or who's touched on this kind of stuff, you think, has two stacks. Why does it have two? That reminds me of a 2 PDA or a 2 pushdown automata. And it turns out that a 2 PDA is actually Turing complete. And so the only missing thing to make Bitcoin script Turing complete is a single outer loop. That if you just have a single outer loop, it actually would be Turing complete. So it's interesting that whoever designed this, Satoshi Nakamoto, must have known this. Like, why the hell would you program it in such an unusual way and then put all the pieces there except the outer loop? Because if only it had an outer loop, it would be Turing complete. That's the only missing piece. And so I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. And so I just kind of explained to Clemens how script works, and he kind of figures this out. It's like, gosh, and like scratching his head going, it's probably Turing complete. I mean, I wonder if it's actually Turing complete. How come everybody keeps saying it's not Turing complete? Because it almost is. So he kind of studies this sort of informally for a while. Eventually, he just kind of works on this in his spare time over, I guess, a year from early 2016 to early 2017. Now, here's the part of the story. I actually don't remember if any of this is public, so I'll give you kind of some inside story here that's kind of interesting. While this stuff is happening, while Clemens is figuring this out, the public learns who someone named Craig Wright is, because in early 2016, well, actually, I think it was originally late 2015, Craig was doxxed. And so he gets in the news, or a couple of articles, one written in Wired, one in like Gizmodo, if I remember correctly, about Craig is Satoshi Nakamoto. Everyone disbelieves this. No one believes, come on, the guy's a fraudster. We don't believe this. And I kind of ignored it. But then in early 2016, I wake up one day and there's an article by Gavin Andresen that says Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm like, what? And then actually on the same day, there's another article by John Matonis, and John Matonis' article was something just like that. It says, like, I know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. I'm like, really? Huh. And then there's also an article by Ian Grigg, who also wrote a blog post on the same day. And so these three people come out on the same day and say that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. And I'm like, okay, well, I just kind of ignored this guy before, but these three people, if you know who these three people are, you drop what you're doing and you listen to what they're saying, because this is important.
Right.
So from then on, I'm like, okay, well, maybe Craig actually isn't a fraud. I mean, there's no way these three people would be saying this if they didn't actually believe what they're saying. Now, there's so much more to the story. I'm going to kind of leave this lightly. I'll try to stick to the Turing completeness stuff. But on the very same day that Gavin Andresen wrote this article, like 1 hour later is when they remove his commit access from Bitcoin Core. And it is definitely true that the Bitcoin Core developers, the people who currently control it, took it over from the community before. They do not have aligned philosophy with everybody in the space. They have a very unique philosophy that was not in the majority until they gradually took over the repo, and that included basically just punting Gavin Andresen because of Craig Wright. Because Gavin Andresen came out and said Craig Wright, Satoshi Nakamoto. He's like, no, he's not. You must have been hacked, Gavin. You're either insane to say this or you were hacked. And so we're going to remove your commit access because you must have been hacked. And so, of course, he wasn't hacked. He actually believed what he was saying. I believe he did validate the keys. I think Craig does have those keys. Whether he's Satoshi or not is a different question.
Sure.
But I think he has actual keys that they validated, and I think that they probably did this correctly, and I don't think that he committed fraud in that case. I don't think that these three particular people would say that if that wasn't true. Mm-hmm. So anyway, now the other thing about Craig Wright is that there's a like no one knew who he was really at all until this stuff started coming out. There was a video with Craig Wright, Nick Szabo, Trace Mayer, Bitcoin Bell, and another guy whose name I can't remember. Bitcoin Bell was the moderator. And in this video, Craig Wright and Nick Szabo have a bit of back and forth where Craig is saying that Bitcoin is Turing complete, and Nick Szabo is saying, no, it's not. What are you talking about?
Right.
And so everybody's like, who is this guy? Like, Bitcoin's Turing complete. Who would say that? Now, I don't quite remember when this video was. The video was probably from like 2015 or something like that. But as soon as this news comes out about Craig Wright, early 2016, when this news starts coming out, we kind of look into who the hell is this guy. So we find this video. Craig says Bitcoin's Turing complete. My co-founder Clemens is like, so these prominent people who would know what they're talking about are saying Craig is Satoshi Nakamoto. And also he's the only person we've ever seen who said that Bitcoin is Turing complete. That's interesting.
Right.
So fast forward a bit. So early 2017, Clemens actually cold emails them and says, hey guys, so I've managed to prove that Bitcoin is Turing complete. Just thought you'd be interested in that. And so this is how we meet in-chain. And actually we end up flying to London and meeting them and talking with them extensively about all sorts of things and doing some whiteboarding with Craig Wright. And so we're pretty convinced at this point there's no way this guy's a fraud. I mean, he does actually know a lot of stuff about Bitcoin, and he taught us a few new things, which I guess I could get into later, but I want to stick to the Turing complete and stuff. But when we were meeting with it, I'm like, I want to make sure, like, is there new knowledge? Is there anything I can learn from this guy that, to like, because I've never seen any digital signatures that prove he has the keys or anything like that. But I just wanted to, see if does he actually know what he's talking about? And yeah, he taught us some stuff about Bitcoin. So I'm like, okay, well, he can't simply be a fraud because we just learned new stuff about Bitcoin from him. So anyway, that was in early 2017. Now, Clemens kind of had an informal proof of the Turing completeness of Bitcoin at that time. And then over the next year, kind of worked on it and gradually turned it into a real proof. Now, I am not enough of an expert in this to tell you how his proof works. I will say that it revolves around not proving that Bitcoin's script is Turing complete, but that Bitcoin as a system is Turing complete, which is a little bit more of a sort of, it's a little bit easier. Like it's a little bit like, I mean, easy is not quite the right word, but more like it's sort of like, it's more understandable. Oh, okay, so maybe Bitcoin is, even though script isn't Turing complete, maybe Bitcoin as a system is.
Right.
And so that's what his proof actually says. And so this is what he gave his presentation on at the Satoshi's Vision Conference in, I think it was in March of this year. And I don't know if he actually ended up making any of the papers public, but I'm pretty sure he plans to if he hasn't made that stuff public yet. But yeah, so that's kind of the story in a nutshell. So that the Turing completeness stuff is how we ended up meeting InChain, and then InChain would actually later end up investing in our company in December. So we ended up raising a round from InChain and Bitmain. Bitmain put in a little bit more money than InChain did, but we liked both Bitmain and InChain and decided to raise money from both of those companies. So,
and I guess that was going to be my next question. Out of curiosity, so you raised funding from those two companies. What has those partnerships been like, and what have you benefited from? Sounds like you learned some things from InChain. But yeah, how are those partnerships going, and how have they been?
Yeah, so I mean, for what it's worth, we don't actually like talk with them all that much. I mean, people will assume like when they invested in your company, they must be like, telling you do these things or something like that. It's not like that at all. We have a very, very light relationship. We probably interact more on social media than any other way. And yeah, it's been completely positive. We've gotten very good support from both of those companies. Yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very positive experience. So we're sort of pivoting actually now to focus on the money button, and both of these companies are supportive of that decision. So, we're doing, the two products we have now are yours.org and Money Button, and we're kind of pivoting the business to focus on Money Button for a lot of reasons. I can get into that. But anyway, they're both extremely supportive, and I couldn't be happier raising money from both of them and having them as partners in this company.
Great. And so maybe we can just jump right into that, because I know you are pivoting, I guess, in a way, pivoting to Money Button. To me, it doesn't really feel like a pivot, because I just think the Money Button itself enables, at least from what I've seen of it and what it sounds like the direction is going in, it'll kind of enable anybody to make a clone of yours.org in some capacity. I don't want to say that per se, but I mean, off the top of my head, you can think of use cases for companies like the New York Times, YouTube. I mean, just about any internet website I can think of that's popular today. Seems like they could implement this, as I've said, trivially. I mean, literally,
yes,
it couldn't have been easier for us to add it to our website. It was the easiest thing I think we've done. So I guess, what directed that decision to do that? And then also, where do you see maybe immediately as you launch, what industry or I guess industry, I guess might be the best word. Like, what are you focusing on? Okay, we've launched the Money Button. Here's who we think will benefit the most right away.
Yeah. So let me sort of give the background on maybe just what it is, because maybe the audience actually doesn't know, and then why we decided to sort of pivot. So look, first of all, yours.org is a social media network with built-in Bitcoin Cash micropayments, so you can earn money for creating good content or voting on content, things like that. We use micropayments in innovative ways to allow people to earn money on this app. Now, the money button, I mean, if you use yours.org, you click a button that sends money. That's the money button. I mean, like, it's just a button that sends money. It's that easy. We just had a bunch of people ask us over and over and over again. They're like, hey, we love your website. We love what you're doing with micropayments, but I already own my existing destination, a publication or a blog or something like that. And I can't, for business reasons, put my content on yours.org. It's got to go on my own blog. Can you please just make a WordPress plugin so that we can put your micropayment system on our existing website? And this just was a common request. So part of it was like, well, maybe let's just build this feature for like our users, because they just keep asking for it. And that'd be pretty cool, to put our micropayments technology on other websites. We just talked with a bunch of people and tried to figure out what's the future of the business. And we realized that the Money Button is probably a better business because it is strictly simpler. Yours.org is a consumer-facing product that requires that we build and curate a community. The Money Button is like all the same stuff, but minus the need for building a community. So it's like it's theoretically easier. So it's like if you could imagine, okay, I'm going to do something like some business in the space of possibilities. You can either pick like a B2C company, which is like you're facing consumers. You do the B2B company, which is where you're facing businesses. The B2B version is just like simpler. So it seems like a better sort of focal point for the business. So yours.org will still exist. However, we think that the biggest value is probably going to be some other thing that we don't necessarily know of yet that somebody's going to use the money button for that ends up becoming bigger than yours.org. So that's kind of how we thought about it. And then we just talked with a bunch of people that gradually said, yeah, the more they thought about it, they were like, yeah, you should focus on the money button. So a lot of like advisors and whatever just told us that it's probably a better business. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of how we decided to do that. And then you had another. Your question was, so now I forget. You had I got lost my train.
Where do you see the most impact right away with the money button? I have a few ideas. I know you've floated a few ideas like on Twitter, but where do you see in the immediate future the money button making the biggest impact?
So in the immediate future, I think it's going to be widely used, I hope widely used, on any sort of publication or content creation website, okay? So a lot of like publications, like a news website, okay? Because a lot of these companies have a need for something like this. Like if advertising revenue is declining for many of these businesses, and also users just kind of annoyed with ads. And the only alternative many of these businesses have are subscriptions. And subscriptions also are fine sometimes, but are also like not really a great replacement necessarily for ads. Some of the users are annoyed with having to sign up for a monthly subscription, including myself. To this day, I have not signed up for the New York Times monthly subscription out of principle. Like I refuse to do so. Wouldn't it be cool if there were just like, it was that easy to integrate micropayments? You could do all sorts of things. You can do tipping. Tipping is the simplest thing to do. Probably won't ultimately be the most effective though. Paywalls you can do. The paywalls are fundamentally different than a subscription paywall, because the paywall with the money button is like a one-click, you can just pay once to read the article thing, which I personally would love to do way more often than sign up for monthly subscription, because if I see an article on some news website where I just don't want to sign up for whoever these people are. I just want the one article and I'm willing to pay for it. You can also do more innovative things like the voting model that we have on yours.org, where you can sort of gamify voting on content, make it fun and profitable to do a good job voting on content. So, and as well as tons of other things like our comment model on yours.org, where you can earn money or pay money for comments. So like you can, monetize a comment thread basically. People have to pay to comment. You can earn money by curating a good sort of comment thread. Anyway, all these are just ideas. There are tons of these things.
Sure.
And you could do whatever. Like you can do anything. Like it's basically everything that you can't do with ads or subscriptions, you can do it with the money button. So it opens up tons of new possibilities. So I think publications and content creator websites are probably where we're going to see the biggest impact early on. But I actually think the bigger impact is going to be all sorts of things that you literally, like you pretty much have to have the money button to even try them. So we can make all sorts of things user friendly. I'd rather actually, I don't want to start spewing out ideas because I'd really rather just do them, but I'll just leave it like kind of a mysterious. I actually think the better thing is going to be the stuff that comes later. That's going to be all these innovative uses of, it's not just micropayments. It's incredibly easy, low fee payments on the internet. That's what it is. It's the ability to just click a button and just send money to somebody else instantly and virtually for free. Opens up new possibilities that people literally have not even tried almost any of these things that you're going to be able to do with the money button. So I'm actually more excited about those other things, the things that you literally don't even know what they are yet, because people just don't even think that way, because we just haven't had the ability to do low fee instant transactions on the internet until now.
Yeah. And so I think the biggest, barrier to using something like the money button today seems to me the access to something like Bitcoin Cash, right? I know, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are also implementing like Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies to allow the ability for the user themselves to receive? I guess, how is that going to work? How is it going to work with, I have two questions. So number one, will it be like a multi-cryptocurrency thing? And then also, what is the on-ramp for people who don't know anything about cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or anything like that to use the money button? Do you have a solution for that? Is that still something that...
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about both these things. So the first question is sort of how does our multi-currency support work? And the second question is what I call the onboarding problem, which I regard as being the biggest problem in the entire cryptocurrency industry. So I'll get to that one second.
Okay.
So first of all, how do we deal with multiple currencies? So from like a sort of business point of view. We're currency agnostic. Now, I'm a huge Bitcoin Cash fan. I am very much not unbiased. I'm very much biased in favor of Bitcoin Cash. I've been around Bitcoin since the early days, and I think that Bitcoin Cash is everything that I'm looking for in a cryptocurrency. It's my personal favorite. We're also basing our technology on Bitcoin Cash. So under the hood, it's all actually Bitcoin Cash. But we also recognize that, we want to make it friendly to everybody. This isn't about, we're not trying to look, if you like Ethereum, that's fine. I mean, we're not anti-Ethereum, we're pro-Ethereum. I like Ethereum too. If it turns out Ethereum ends up being bigger than Bitcoin Cash, I'm cool with that. That's great. I just want to see this technology change the world. And so we are friendly to Ethereum, and we're friendly to the other cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin Core as well. So there's a way we can support all these people, which is basically shapeshift. You can shapeshift in and you can shapeshift out easily. So we're building in shapeshift support so that you can cash out with whatever your favorite cryptocurrency is. In fact, we're actually going one further. We let you pick the currency that everything is denominated in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we want to make it friendly to normal people. So, if you live in Argentina, when you go visit the thing for the first time, it says, hey, you live in Argentina, because we can look at your IP address. And we default you to the Argentina peso as the currency that you see in the app. So you have such and such amount of Bitcoin Cash, but actually it shows you the value in Argentina peso. And we're like, hey, if we can do that for pesos, we could actually do that for cryptocurrencies too, so that if you live in Etherland and you prefer ETH, you can see prices denominated in ETH. So we just pick you whatever your favorite currency is. It could be the Argentina peso, or it can be ETH, or it can be Ripple, or whatever. It can be any currency at all. So we just have generic currency conversion built in. So you display whatever it is. And this is kind of how it should be in the world. If you ever traveled internationally, you go to a new country, they use a different currency. The prices are all in whatever. You have no idea. You don't understand the native currency. You got to do mental arithmetic to convert everything.
Right.
The way it should be is it should show you everything in a currency that you understand. So that's exactly how we do it. The end user sees whatever currency they want. They can cash in, cash out with that currency, whatever. That's how it looks to them. Now, the other problem is the onboarding problem. Now, this is the biggest problem in the cryptocurrency industry. The problem is basically as follows. Imagine you're a user of the money button. You visit a website for the first time. You're like, this is interesting. You click on the money button, but you're not already a user of the money button. What happens?
Right.
Well, we have to onboard you to crypto. We have to get you to acquire crypto somehow before you can really use the money button. Now, unfortunately, when we launch this thing in August, we will not have a full solution to this problem. So I'll tell you the way it will work in August. We're actually probably not even going to support credit cards, unfortunately, in August, because the situation is so bad. Ideally, if you could cash in with a credit card, it would be pretty good, because it's still bad that you have to type in your credit card info. Ideally, you wouldn't even have to do that.
Sure.
But for some users, they will be able to cash in with a credit card. Unfortunately, what happened recently is, as of a few months ago, many of the major banks in the US block cryptocurrency purchases with credit cards.
Right.
So if the user tries to cash in with a credit card, we don't even know that your credit card doesn't work until we get an error message. And so we display, sorry, it doesn't work. So this is just a really bad user experience that you go there, even if you bother to type in your credit card info, we actually don't know that it's going to work, that it's not going to work until we try and it says, sorry, it doesn't work. You just typed in your credit card info for no reason. Sorry, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
That's terrible, and that's kind of outside of our hands. So we integrate with the Coinbase credit card buy widget, which is actually a really good piece of software, but it literally only works for a small fraction of people.
Sure.
So most people, it just doesn't work. So we'll actually end up partnering with two companies, Coinbase and Simplex. These are the two companies that actually support credit card onboarding for some people. So that will work for some people. For the people that it doesn't work for, we are not going to have an answer. We won't have an answer in August. We won't have an answer in September. But I will say that it's a problem I take seriously. And let me sketch out some ideas for how we can solve this in the future. So first of all, we have some crypto that we can give out to people. We're going to give a portion of our funds. We're just going to give it away. So we could just give some to new users, but we don't want to be scammed out of all this money.
Right.
So one thing we can do is have the user go through some type of onboarding process where they auth with a social media account like Facebook, something like that. Maybe they do a multiple step process. I bought the domain name IamNewToBitcoin.com. I'm thinking about using this maybe as an onboarding thing. You go there, if you auth with Facebook, you read the Satoshi white paper and answer 3 questions, and you write an article about how you were introduced to crypto and you post it to Facebook, and you check all these boxes, we'll give you $5 worth of cryptocurrency.
I love that.
Okay? So this is something we'll probably do this. We won't have this in August. We won't have this in September either. But we are actually going to give money to people. And so it might look like that. It might look like we literally have a website. You go there, you onboard, and we give it to some people. The problem with this, obviously, is that we're going to run out of money. We just can't do this for literally the entire planet. So then what do we do? So I'll give you a few other ideas. Another way is you earn it. So maybe we build in a way to earn it into the system. So imagine there's a different website where, okay, we can't give everybody crypto, but what we can do is we can make it really, really easy to fulfill bounties. So maybe what we do is make a social network dedicated to cryptocurrency users create bounties for small units of work where they're willing to pay cryptocurrency. And we channel new users to that bounty website. So for instance, imagine you're a holder of cryptocurrency and you want people to do something like create content about cryptocurrency or something. Who knows what it is?
Sure.
Some type of bounty website. If we make it, sort of create a market of bounties, we could channel new users to that. And then so they're funded by other new users. They actually do some work like Mechanical Turk or something like that. They actually do something for some other user who then pays them for the results of their work. That's another thing we could do. I think something like that should probably be a part of an onboarding process because we literally just don't have enough money to give it to everyone. This might be the only option some of these people have is to actually work for it. Another option is borrowing. Maybe some users will actually be able to borrow some. Once again, you're probably going to have to do some type of like KYC or something like that because you're not going to just loan money to an anonymous internet user. But if you know something about them, you know that they're good for it, that they're probably going to be able to pay you back next week or something like that. Maybe you could loan some to them. So we could create a market for loaning cryptocurrency to new users who then go through an exchange and buy some to be able to pay you back. But that process takes a week or two to actually do all that. And in the meantime, you loan it to them. So that's another option. So those are the ideas I have. So in a nutshell, things like Shapeshift is going to work great for people that already have crypto. Mm-hmm. For people that don't, credit cards will work for some of those users, but unfortunately, credit cards just won't work for some of them. So another option is we can give it away to some of those people. Another option is we can create units of work on some type of like a market website where you fulfill bounties in exchange for some crypto, and then finally maybe you borrow it from some other users. So that's, as far as I can tell, like pretty much a comprehensive list of the ways to solve this. We do every single one of those things and channel the new users correctly to like whichever one makes the most sense for that user. That's how we do it. And I don't know a better way. I think I just listed pretty much them all. If we do all those things and channel the users correctly, I think that's how we onboard that's how we onboard new users to crypto.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little frustrating, right? Because I think you mentioned this, but a year ago, credit card payments to buy, crypto on Coinbase, for example, was pretty flawless. It never really ran into any issues. So I guess maybe the last scenario might be what I would hope is that you mentioned things like if you go to like Forbes or New York Times, any kind of really journalistic publishing website, if it's asking me to turn off my ad blocker, it's like 50-50 whether I'm going to just close the tab or not. So there's definitely, I think, a market demand for I will pay a micropayment for this content. So maybe hopefully the other option would be that market forces say, hey, let us use our credit card to enter this money button.
Yeah,
ecosystem.
That would be great.
Yeah,
that would be great because really it's just, I think, the banks have the reason. I mean, I don't think the banks are evil in this case. The banks are the ones that decided to block cryptocurrency purchases. I'm pretty sure they did it for good business reasons. I'm pretty sure the reason why they actually did it, it's not because they're evil and they're trying to destroy Bitcoin. It's that there are a heck of a lot of people buying crypto with credit cards that they couldn't afford,
right,
and speculating with the bank's money on crypto and then losing it because the market crashed. So, I mean, if I were a bank, I wouldn't want to loan money to whoever just because they want to speculate on cryptocurrency because they might never be able to pay it back.
Yeah.
It's the bank's money. It's not the user's money. So that's the thing with credit cards. Debit cards actually still work. You can use debit cards with the Coinbase credit card widget. But they have other issues. Like I tried it with a debit card and it took a week before I got the Bitcoin Cash. So a week is a very long time. I mean, we need instant solutions. But debit cards will work for some people. But yeah, I mean, the situation used to be better. Maybe we'll get lucky and the banks will realize that, this can work. I don't know.
Sure.
I hope.
Sure.
That would be better though.
Well, so I only have a couple more questions for you, but I do want to ask one because you mentioned earlier. I'm just kind of really curious. What were some of those things that you learned about Bitcoin when you flew out to Enchain that you didn't know before? I guess.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. Can I say this because we signed an NDA?
You can be as.
I'll say it. I don't want to give details because we did actually sign an NDA, and I genuinely don't know if this particular thing is public.
Okay.
But I'll say that we were doing payment channels at the time, and we talked to the area of like, was malleability, transaction malleability. And what did Craig think about this, and does he have any answers to this? And Craig actually gave us a unique solution to transaction malleability that applied in our case that I had never heard before. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. I don't want to tell you what it is just because like it's I don't know if they've ever actually been public about it. So I don't want to say that part of it.
Sure.
But that is what it was. So it had to do with transaction malleability. I'm like, oh, I've never heard that idea before. That's a great idea that actually would work in this case. And so I'd never heard that anywhere. I mean, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time. I'm like, that's it. There's new knowledge. I learned something genuinely new. Like in all this research I've done on payment channels and malleability, like I've never heard this solution before. That's a great idea. So hopefully that'll come out. It's not like it's that, amazing of an idea. I just don't want to give the particulars of it just because
Sure.
I think it's probably still secret as of this day, as best I can remember.
No problem. My last question for you, and because this is something that we do a lot on social media, but so I guess I'll preface this with number one, I want to like applaud you because you are by far the most vocal, I think, person that it's almost impossible for any kind of reasonable person to be like, oh, that guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Every time you step in front of a camera or you post on social media, it's always sensical. It makes so much sense. And it's just like, it's anyone who's been following Bitcoin for a while, it's kind of a breath of fresh air. I know that for the majority of people, when the fork happened, a lot of people finally became excited again about Bitcoin. And I definitely, obviously yours.org was on Bitcoin Cash within weeks. So that's obviously a big proponent, but I do want to applaud you for like, you've by far been one of the front runners of like, this is my opinion. And this is the right, in my opinion, this is the right opinion. And you're definitely one of our inspirations to like we didn't think we would be doing something like this, like putting a podcast or anything like that. Just kind of like no one is doing it. People need to start talking about this. You're definitely not alone in thinking that. And I'm just, thank you for like being vocal about it.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's great to hear.
And so one of my favorite tweets you made, which a lot of people didn't like, was you had just posted Bitcoin parentheses BCH and not speaking as the CEO of the money button right now.
Yeah.
Why is Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin to you?
Sure. Let me explain that tweet first, because so there was a Brian Hoffman of Open Bazaar. I think it was either that day or it was the day before, had said something that pissed off a bunch of people, or I forget exactly the circumstances, something like that. And I think around the same time, I don't quite remember the timing, there's also something where Bitcoin.com put
Right.
I think it was somebody at Bitcoin.com, like changed one of the coin BCH or something like that. Again, sparking a bunch of drama about all this issue. So I'm like, look, if you listen to like Roger's argument for why he thinks it's fair to say that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, he makes a very compelling argument, which is you just list off what are all the properties that you would think Bitcoin should have. And Bitcoin Cash has all of them but one, which is Bitcoin Cash is not the longest chain by total proof of work, but by every other property that you can think of, it is Bitcoin. And then like the other one, Bitcoin Core, if you start listing up these issues, actually it no longer has like 7 of these things that you would think that Bitcoin should have, but it does still have the total proof of work thing. So it is still the longest chain by total proof of work. Anyway, so there's a perfectly like, this is a normal, like intelligent thing to talk about. Like it makes perfect sense to ask this question, is Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin? Like this is not a scam question. It's a valid question. And there are perfectly valid reasons to say that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. Now, when I tweeted that, so my tweet was, I was like, okay, to be completely honest, I was trying to rile people up because I thought that I bet all I have to do, if I just say Bitcoin parenthesis BCH. I bet I'm going to piss off like hundreds of people, which is exactly what happened. So I just kind of wanted to do it to just kind of see what would happen. So the tweet was just the simplest tweet you could possibly imagine. Bitcoin, and then in parentheses BCH, hinting that I'm saying that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. And sure enough, that got like way more comments than any other tweet I may have ever done in my life. Got like 250 comments or something like that, which is just way more than like the average. On average, it would be like 5 comments or something like that for a tweet. Right. So I got way more comments. Didn't get all that many retweets or favorites. What it got was like a shitload of comments. So people were just like, it got tons and tons and tons of trolls saying whatever, you're an idiot, you're a Bcash scammer, Roger Ver, right. Jihan, whatever, blah blah blah, Bcash, So lots of that stuff, and then but including other people just saying like, I remember someone who I know, Dan Held, who's just sort of probably a bit strong to say he's a friend of mine, but he's someone who I've known for several years. Who's on the opposite side of this debate. He quote tweeted me and it's like, this is fraud for me to say Bitcoin BCH. But actually, there's nothing wrong with what I said. All I said was Bitcoin BCH. Like, there's nothing that's not fraud to say that. So anyway, that's sort of why I did it. Like, I kind of wanted to see what would happen, and I was right that it caused a lot of like conversation.
Right.
But I also, it's not like I'm saying that it is unquestioningly the case that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. I would say it the exact same way that Roger Ver said it, which is just write down the properties. What's the question? Which thing satisfies which properties? And it is true that Bitcoin Cash actually satisfies all the boxes but one, and it actually satisfies more of the boxes than Bitcoin Core does. Nonetheless, it is also true that what do most of the exchanges and wallets say is Bitcoin? They say Bitcoin Core is Bitcoin. That's also true. So anyway, I try to just keep it factual, and I would just list, if people want to know what are those properties, I would just write them all down. Things like digital cash, you can send it to other people with low fees and stuff like that. And it's a bunch of other things like that. Bitcoin Cash satisfies more of those properties than Bitcoin Core does. I would also add to that, it's also true that a large fraction of the Bitcoin community moved to Bitcoin Cash when SegWit 2x was canceled. So that event was like, okay, well, that's it. Like, Bitcoin Core is on a completely different path than what we thought originally. Like, this isn't what we're interested in. But Bitcoin Cash was like the backup plan. And so many of us just switch our businesses, switch our holdings to Bitcoin Cash, and switch all of our attention. I no longer really even research Bitcoin Core in any way, shape, or form, but I do research. Like, if you look at the videos I was creating this week, I'm studying ZeroConf. I'm trying to figure out how to make ZeroConf better. And I'm doing this for Bitcoin Cash, not Bitcoin Core. So my attention, money, business, everything's focused on Bitcoin Cash. So that's kind of how I see it.
So that actually reminds me, we're close to now here. My last question for you, because this was something you made an awesome video. We called it out in the episode we just did on zero confirmation. And what you're doing specifically is putting a server on the other side of the globe. And so that way you can have some kind of reliable certainty as to whether or not a zero confirmation payment will be secure. Maybe very briefly, if you could just talk about how is zero confirmation going to work on the money button. I thought that the video was brilliant. I mean, really, it was the first case we saw. Probably as far as I know, in Bitcoin's history, where someone really broke down, we're going to do this because we're a merchant and there's an incentive for us to do this, and this is why we think zero confirmation is reliable. So maybe if you could just talk about it a little bit. It was just really cool to see that, because it's something that I know that theoretically I've talked with other people about for a while now, and then I was like, oh, cool, like the money button's doing it. Like, it's actually going to work in practice. So if you can just talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. So let me back up again. This is something where I've been influenced by Craig Wright about. Craig Wright is one of the small number of people that has a very economic focused understanding of Bitcoin. And in fact, there's a quote from Craig. He says something like, this was in some recent either panel or presentation he gave, or something like that. Bitcoin is actually not a crypto system. Bitcoin is an economic system that uses cryptography. And I think if you think about it that way, a lot of things just make a lot more sense. That really is what it is. It's like an economic protocol. And yeah, we use crypto and computers and stuff like that, but it's really economics first. The thing is entirely based on economics and would not work if it didn't have the correctly designed incentives to make it work. So with that in mind, the the thing you have to do to make so zero conf is like the transaction's not confirmed yet. So you're kind of outside the bounds of the consensus protocol of Bitcoin to like rely on zero conf. But look, it's an economic question. There's a certain probability that you're going to be double spent. And if you know what that probability is, it's a cost benefit analysis. It's an economic calculation. So you really just need to know what's that probability. And then like, what's your level of risk and what are your margins and whatever it is that you're selling. It's an economic question. It's a business question. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And this is something that a lot of people misunderstand, including Bitcoin Core. The people who are developing Bitcoin Core are obsessed with security perfection. Security perfection doesn't exist. Security is always and everywhere an economic question. When you create a digital signature, it is always possible that you've cheated or that you've been cheated. Now, you could see a digital signature from someone else. It could be that they just guessed the public key. Could be that they just guessed the signature. But you know that it's very improbable that they guessed the private key or that they guessed the signature. It's almost impossible, but not technically impossible for them to have done that. It's an economic question. The risk is so low that you just kind of, you factor it out. It's like, yeah, okay, so I'm willing to accept this digital signature. The same thing is true for zero conf, except the probabilities are a little bit like lower. So like 99% probability is okay for a lot of applications. So especially on yours.org or the money button. If you're buying an article for $1, what is the margin on the newspaper? Well, I don't know. But if you have like 1% fraud, where 1 out of 100 people manage to double spend and buy the article for free, it's not that big of a deal. It's annoying. You do have 1% loss, but you can definitely factor this into all of your other expenses, and it's not really an issue if every once in a while someone manages to steal an article from you without paying for it. So that's how to think about it. So if you think about it that way, ZeroConf already actually works quite well. You don't even really need to do anything to actually use ZeroConf as it is on Bitcoin Cash today, because actually the network rules are actually already set up to make ZeroConf work quite reliably. It's actually not so easy to double spend. Somebody has to go out of the way to do it. Although I'll give you an algorithm right now for how you can do it, which is why it's still a risk. Here's what you do. If you want to double spend somebody, you build 2 transactions. You broadcast them twice. You send one to the other side of the planet, broadcast it from there. So roughly speaking, it reaches half the network. You wait 100 milliseconds or so, and then you broadcast another one locally to local nodes. And that way, the 2 transactions will propagate the network at approximately the same time. They'll reach half the network each. So one of them will reach half the miners, the other one will reach the other half. And so there's a 50% probability that you're going to be able to execute a double spend. So if you actually go out of your way to do it, you can double spend 50% of the time. Or if you're just an evil miner or you collaborate with an evil miner, you could ratchet it up a bit and have a slightly higher probability of double spending. So it is a real risk, but you do have to go out of your way to do it. It's not that easy. So the question is there a way we can mitigate this risk even more? And so the answer is, all right, well, and I'm kind of explaining it lightly, but you do really have to think about the time it actually takes for just data to go around the world to actually do this correctly. So why don't we just set up a node on the other side of the planet, which it just connects to a bunch of other nodes, and we set a 0 fee relay threshold so that basically it sees every transaction and doesn't ignore transactions that have a low fee. It's important because what we really care about is just seeing every transaction on the network, and we don't want to exclude transactions that don't have a fee. We want to see transactions that might be a double spend even if they don't have a fee. So by setting this up on the other side of the planet with well-connected, it's connected to lots of other nodes, and it has this sort of 0 fee relay threshold, it's very, very unlikely that someone would be able to broadcast a double spend that isn't seen by one of our nodes. So we're going to see the double spend. So we just wait like 100 milliseconds, ask the other node, do you see a double spend? If you don't see one, we're probably good. And so we don't actually know what fraction of the time double spends will occur, but we'll be able to start accumulating statistics on this with the new version of the money button, because we're actually going to track all this stuff. So then once we track it, we'll be able to see how often do double spends occur, which probably they don't occur very often, if ever. Well, they do occur sometimes, but probably it's very rare. Then we'll literally have a probability. We'll be able to say, oh, okay, so we actually know what the probability of a double spend is now. It's like 1% or whatever it is, or less than 1% maybe. And so then we can actually do things like tell you what's the probability that you're going to be double spent. And you'll be able to say, oh, well, it's only 1%, so that's okay. So that's how to think about it. It's a purely economic question. You run a cost-benefit analysis, and with the new money button, we're actually going to know how often double spends actually occur. And so we'll be able to give you that information as a publisher or as an app developer. And I'm also considering maybe we actually provide insurance, because if we actually know how often it occurs, maybe we could guarantee the payment for you, and we take on that risk for a fee. So maybe we provide insurance to the app developers that use it. So anyway, so that's how I think about it. And yeah, I think we've got a pretty good solution that mitigates the risk a lot. And we should both be able to track double spends, keep the number of double spends very, very low. Because if we notice a double spend, the payment's not valid. I mean, it's only like, the only question is like, how often do they occur where we don't notice it early and that it gets in a block or something like that. So anyway, we're going to track all this stuff and be able to actually assign probabilities and give high levels of assurance to people that your transaction is going to work. And then you can run the numbers yourself on the economics of it. Does it make sense to accept ZeroConf? If it does, then yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're a little over an hour here. I really appreciate your time. This was a great conversation. I can't say enough good things about everything that you've been doing. And I mean, the fact that, again, yours.org was one of the first things to be built on top of Bitcoin Cash is awesome. And it's so good that the Lightning Network is trying to copy you with their y'all's stupid clone. But obviously, yours.org is way more easier to use than setting up a Lightning node. But we're really looking forward to the money button. Again, congrats on everything you've done so far, and we're really looking forward to seeing what happens in the future here. And again, thank you for your time, for sure.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being on your show. Same to you. I appreciate the work that you're doing, creating great content about this stuff. So, I appreciate your effort as well, and I really appreciate all your kind words, and thank you very much for all that.
Thank you. All right, Ryan, have a good one. Appreciate it.